Minister Muhamad, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, thank you for the invitation.
What are the biggest environmental problems Colombia faces today?
Well, there's multiple environmental problems. Colombia is a complex country with many geographies. So one of the critical issues will be deforestation. The country still has 51% coverage in natural forests, but that forest is what produces our water. And we have many threats that are actually increasing deforestation, and we're losing forests at a very important rate, putting in risk our water, especially with climate. And that will be a second issue. It's one of the top countries where the impacts of climate change will be felt mostly, especially we are having more intense droughts, but also more intense heavy rains and more extreme events. And that is already causing a toll on the economy and on people. And then third, I will say pollution. We haven't managed yet to be able to address the pollution of water, especially on sanitation. So still more than 80% of waters go straight to water streams without treatment. And that creates a heavy pollution that we could and should avoid.
Mining is a big industry in Colombia, so how are you trying to balance economic growth while also protecting your country's natural resources?
This is the most important question for the future of environment in Colombia. How are we going to shift from an extractive economy dependent on the extraction, especially of fossil fuels, towards a productive economy which has other sectors of the economy that can be more productive, but at the same time they can restore nature. And we are putting our bets in international nature-based tourism, also agriculture.
Your country is hosting COP16. Talk to us about the biodiversity. What actions you hope to accomplish during this event?
It is an important moment, especially hosting the meeting in a mega biodiverse country. That has to mean something, and it also has to mean something that we are hosting it in Latin America, which is one of the most biodiverse regions. We would like to have as a result that there is a mechanism for sharing benefits of the use of digital sequences of genetic resources. This means the genetic codes of organisms that are put in public databases and are used by industry, but there's no benefits coming back to the countries that are holding the biodiversity. Second, we'd like to get approved the work program for indigenous peoples and local communities. And we see that in Colombia, almost a third of the land is under indigenous people's hand. We have to protect their lands and their cultures because that's part of the key of protecting biodiversity. And there's also the financial discussion, which is a critical financial discussion. We would like to see an intergovernmental process starting that can create in the future a mechanism where all sources of finance can be included by having developed countries fulfilling their commitments, but going beyond that to be able to have a process that really gets the scale of finance that this transition needs, and especially taking care of nature needs.
You mentioned the indigenous communities, the local communities. Will they actually have a role, a say during COP16?
The high-level segment of discussion, we will be including indigenous peoples and other stakeholders, because we really believe in that principle of the coming Montreal Agreement, that this is a process that requires the involvement and mobilization of a whole government and whole of society. This is not a problem of the ministers of environment. Taking care of nature and conserving nature is a problem of mobilizing all the sectors, and indigenous peoples are critical in this regard, so they will have a strong voice in COP16.
Tell us a little bit more about the Escazú Agreement and how it will make environmental decision-making more transparent, and why this agreement is so important.
It is important because it puts highlight, especially in a region that has very high violence against environmental defenders, and it is a commitment of the governments in Latin America that have signed it to actually uphold international standards on access of information for environmental defendants. So citizens have the right to know what, for example, industries are putting on the environment and how that affects their health. Citizens have the right to understand what are the decisions that could affect the environment and affect communities. And the government has the responsibility to provide that information. But it also has the responsibility that if there is a community or there's people or citizens opposing certain type of development, even if it's done by the government, we have to protect their lives, and we have to protect their right for saying and being part of the decision.
So as the international community comes to Colombia for COP16, knowing the different complications, what do you want to showcase? What do you want to highlight? What do you want them to see?
We want them to see what it means to be in one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. But actually, by hosting COP16, we are very interested also in responding that question for ourselves, for the Colombian people. What it means for an average Colombian to live in one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. And that answer is not clear yet. That's why for us internally, the Biodiversity COP has mobilized all the sectors in putting that question at the center. Otherwise, biodiversity will be destroyed and we will be losing part of that. We also want to highlight what we are calling peace with nature. And that has two understandings in Colombia. We have indigenous peoples which see that if we change the way we relate to nature and we stop seeing it as a natural resource, and we realize that we are part of bigger cycles of nature, and we can put that question in everything we do. This destruction of nature and the environment, it has not happened on its own. And it is a model, an economic model that creates these consequences. How can we change that? So that's why we call, what we want to highlight is the People's COP. And the very big participation that we are creating in the Green Zone, the largest green zone for a biodiversity COP, with the mobilization of many actors and a very lively and public debate. And that's the spirit that Colombia is inviting the world to build with us at COP16.
Minister Susana Muhamad, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for this space.